Wade. I don't see Wade's not on here, but she says a hello everyone on the meeting chat.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if she's just listening and not sure, but
Yeah, she says, yeah, I'm here. Huh.
okay. So maybe she can hear, but we just don't see her because her video's off. Okay, I see.
Yeah, might be.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'll go ahead just to say thank you so much, Bob, for gracing us with your presence. And I really appreciate having you join us. And this is a group that people pop in and pop out. There'll probably be a few more people joining us in the next few minutes. But yeah, anyway, just thank you for being here. This is a man who needs really no introduction, but you can maybe tell everybody what you're up to, and I'll let you just kind of take it from there.
Okay, great. And I'm going to be admitting people coming in. So let me do that. And I see familiar faces from years ago. And it's so good to see you all. And those of you who I don't know, we're all part of this ongoing TMF community. So it's good to be here with you all. I thought what I would do is, first of all, I'll introduce myself, but then I want to just tell you the agenda for tonight. And the topic that I want to address, and maybe a challenge to all of us, is what I'm calling radical accessibility. In other words, how do we reach the 99.9% of people who can't come to our classes, our workshops, our retreats? That's most people in the world for various reasons. So I want to offer you some ideas and share with you some of what we did at Sharp Healthcare, and then leave time for a discussion and comments. But then also I want to introduce you to a technique, a mindfulness technique that we've used at Sharp, and it's comes out of unified mindfulness, and it's part of this idea of making mindfulness accessible to people in simple and easy ways. So that's the agenda for tonight. Okay. So maybe the first thing we could do is, why don't we take 5 minutes and just settle in and practice. This will be an open practice. Any technique that you need or like, you can do. And I'll keep track, and I'll end this in 5 minutes. Okay, good job, everybody. Good practice. So I see familiar faces and names on the screen, and it's so good to be with you all. I have allergies tonight, so I may be a little hoarse, but I'll do the best I can. So my name is Bob McClure. For those of you who don't know me, I graduated from TMF in I think it was 2012 or 13, and then was a advisor and mentor for many years, and left a few years ago. And what I want to offer, I want to take a few minutes to offer you some ideas on this idea of what I call radical accessibility. And then leave time for some discussion, comments, questions. And then I'm going to guide you in a practice that relates to what I'm going to talk about as radical accessibility. And then leave time at the very end for any other comments and questions. So the idea of radical accessibility for mindfulness is, we talk about it in terms of trauma-sensitive mindfulness, in terms of diversity and equity. There's a lot of emphasis, particularly at TMF, about opening up our practice to people, as many people as possible. But when I talk about radical accessibility, what I mean is, how do we bring what we teach in the traditional models that we teach it, how do we bring it to the 99.9% of people who can't either afford or can't find the time to attend our classes, our groups, our retreats, our workshops? When you think about it, it's a small group of people, really, although it's growing, that have the privilege of being able to come and do the training that we offer. So this is the challenge that I faced in most of my career. My background is I'm a social worker and psychotherapist, and most of my work was at Sharp Healthcare, at least the last 20 years, and I ran what's called an employee assistance program. And EAPs, employee assistance programs, what we did was we tried to translate mental health services to our 20,000 employees at Sharp, again, for the people who either didn't have time or the money to go to therapy. So we had to create a different way to deliver mental health services to people. So in, I think, about 2015, when I started teaching mindfulness in the organization, I used the very same model. Most of the people that I came across did not have time to come to my workshops or my groups or even my classes. So I had to come up with, and not just me, this is a movement, but I had to come up with different ways, different models, and different venues to make accessible, radically accessible mindfulness practices, and more importantly, mindfulness training to the people that just didn't have the privilege of attending what we normally offer. And so that's what I've done the last 6 years at Sharp Healthcare in San Diego here, until I retired 2 months ago. And now I'm doing a little bit of teaching, but most of my career in the last 6 years, we're attempting to do what I'm talking about. And, I think, as you know, there is no better time to be teaching mindfulness. The benefits of mindfulness are more needed now than maybe at any other time, given what we're all living with in a changing world. And early on in my career of teaching mindfulness at Sharp, a senior vice president said to me, he said, this is a great idea. We really need it here, but you're going to have to figure out a way to bring it to them, not have them come to you. And that was the challenge. How could I deliver my mindfulness-based training into the workplace or into the lives of people who just, again, did not have time or privilege to come to classes? And that was what I was stuck with. And so in terms of venues, we developed models that are probably familiar to you, the half-hour drop-in at lunchtime. And I created a culture because these are busy nurses and doctors and auxiliary staff that are just really pounded in terms of their stress and schedule. So they didn't necessarily have a half-hour lunchtime to come to my drop-ins. So one of the things I did is created a culture that gave them permission to drop in, even for 5 minutes, and to take away what they could. They could bring their lunch or come and go. And people did. They finally took me up on that. And, it was with the idea that you can introduce to some practices of mindfulness, and they'll take away even something small that can actually make a difference in terms of their lives. And so that's what we did. So drop-ins, I found ways to show up at department meetings and even give moments of mindfulness. The other thing was I was working on giving people what I call portable practices. If a nurse didn't have, a nurse with kids that she had to get them out the door in the morning and get to work, she may not have time to sit down and meditate. So could we create practices that somebody like that could do during the day, maybe brief? And, we're all familiar with things like the body scan or even some kind of body practice that people can do while they're doing other things. And then as we moved into bringing mindfulness more clearly into SHARP, what we began to do is to incorporate mindfulness into the jobs that people were already doing. And I think this is this is where it's got to go. And since I've retired, that's what they're still doing at SHARP. So an example would be, we had a high medication error rate in one of the divisions. So we focused on nurses who were delivering medications, and we created mindfulness rituals that I didn't tell them how to do it. They told me how to do it since they were the experts. And so we created things like a practice where the nurse giving medication would stop and take just even a minute, and that's all that was required or less, and do what we call a see, hear, feel practice that grounded them, allowed them to relieve their stress, and then notice what it is they were giving as a medication and noticing the person who they were giving it to. The other thing we did is it taught nurses when they're going to give you an injection, for example, or a vaccination, to be able to do a little ritual with you as a patient. And it went something like this. And again, I worked with the nurses to tell me how best they administered medication. I'm not the expert. And then we built mindfulness practices into it. So an example would be, you'd be sitting and the nurse would come up to you and say, would you like to do a really short little practice that would help you feel calmer and me too? And if the person said no, then they didn't do it. If they said yes, then it was as simple as, let's take a couple of deep breaths right now, and let's look at a beautiful object in the room. And then they would give the person a little bit of time. It was a grounding practice. And then the nurse would go ahead and give the injection or the vaccination. It not only supported the nurse's focus and concentration, but it helped the patient calm down. And it provided a way to connect with patients in a really wonderful way. So these are just examples of some of what we did. And the movement, again, I think you can hear, is the challenge we all face is in the arenas where you deliver mindfulness, what are the people we're leaving out? And how can we create new venues and new models to bring mindfulness to the people? Now, I think where we went in the last couple of years is what's now being called digital therapeutics. And I personally believe that this is the future, that every single one of us has an iPhone or a phone, an Android or an iPhone. We all have phones. And we can use what's called digital therapeutics to deliver not just drop-in meditations, not just 5 minutes of calm, for example, or a meditation you can just listen to, but real training. That it's possible with this new form of digital training that you can actually have mindfulness training ready and available anytime you could do it. And so we implemented what I'm talking about at Sharp. And I partnered with Carnegie Mellon University, particularly the Health and Human Performance Lab run by David Creswell. Dr. Creswell is a prominent researcher in mindfulness and also a UCLA graduate, by the way. What they've developed at Carnegie Mellon is what they call EQUA, and it's actually based on their digital therapeutics models of delivering mindfulness training in a 10-minute format for 2 weeks. So I have a quick PowerPoint I want to share with you because I think it illustrates what we were doing there and also what they're still doing, by the way. So this is the introduction PowerPoint they're going to provide for a research conference in just a couple of weeks, but it gives a good basic overview. A science-backed training, and I want to emphasize training because when you think about the most popular apps right now, Headspace, Calm, Insight Timer, they're great. A lot of people get value out of them, but there's a couple of problems. One is that you might be surprised that the average churn of those big apps like Headspace and Calm, or even Insight Timer, churn meaning people try it and then leave, is 2.3 days or 2.5 days actually. So for every person that goes on those apps, they tend to try it for a couple days and then leave. So there's tremendous churn because people are approaching it like a library. Can I drop in, do something, feel calmer, and then go away? And that's fine, but it's not training. They're not training the skills they need that they get by, coming to a class series or a group training. So this idea of digital interactive apps it's science-based training for, in this case, for Sharp employees. And the goal has been to implement this app-based training in a 14-day skills training. And that's what we did. We implemented the 14-day training on the phone for 10 minutes a day. Let me see if I can get this to move. There we are. So this is skill-based. So these are the 3 skills that were identified as mindfulness, concentration, clarity, and equanimity. So we really are training people to use skills, and especially for their daily lives. This is the team. And I want to highlight Dr. David Creswell. You can Google him, and he's a very prolific researcher, so there's a lot of research going on. We ran a number of research studies with clinical staff, doctors, HR. My boss, who was the HR senior VP, we did the whole HR team, all 120 people, as well as the executive teams in these research studies. in really the whole idea was that we would help employees have greater awareness and empathy and understanding, but also increase their ability to pay attention and to manage their stress, especially. So this is important. The app provides a 10-minute skills training for 14 days. And it's not just listening to a guided meditation, because again, you can get that on any other app, but it's an interactive engagement. So for example, when you're learning a particular technique, at some point, the digital coach will say, press 1 on your phone if it was pleasant, press 2 if it was unpleasant. There's a whole bunch of choices based on the skills. And then depending on what you report, there's a whole different training. So it's really uniquely adapting itself to what you need, not just a generic training. And what they're working on, I think the future, because as you know, AI, artificial intelligence, is swooping into everything. It won't be long before we have AI coaches in these apps that will be really like a interactive discussion with a live coach, and maybe even smarter than some of us. So it's practice in real life for 10 minutes, and then we also surrounded them with access by text and by telephone calls and meetings on Zoom to support them in turn, and support the trainees and the research students to do the training. So what we measured, and I want to, at this point, I want to just share with you real quick the results of actually one of the studies that because the data was statistically significant. And again, this is Carnegie Mellon did this research in partnering with us. And again, it's a 10-minute training for 14 days. So what did we see? And again, it was at Carnegie Mellon's Health and Human Performance. What do we see? Well, the demographics for this particular research study was physicians, and there were 60% female, 36% male. And for almost 50% completed all 14 lessons, but 69% completed 11 out of the 14, which is pretty extraordinary. When you think about these busy physicians and nurses taking 10 minutes of their day on their own to do this training, there was a lot of compliance. So now here's the results that I think really do speak to the efficacy of this digital therapeutic training. We got a report, and this is statistically significant, through different measures and self-reports. There was a 39% reduction in depression. Again, this is in 2 weeks with overwhelmed, busy physicians and nurses. There was also 27% increase in sleep quality. And that was one of the most reported symptoms that people, depression and lack of sleep amongst these stressed out healthcare professionals. A 9% increase in life satisfaction. A 1% increase in attention control. And this is one of our main goals. And I think, although it was statistically significant, I think it speaks to how the training needs to be longer to really change the ability to focus. A 3% decrease in reported burnout. And I think this is especially important given how complex burnout is in healthcare and how pernicious it is right now. So in a 14-day, 10-minute-a-day training to get a 3% decrease in burnout was pretty astounding. And then an almost 20% increase in work-life balance. And that's the one thing, that's one of the things that physicians and nurses reported they had terrible work-life balance. So even to get a 20% increase was really important. And then a 3%, almost 4% increase in teamwork, which, in healthcare is so important and often a challenge. A 2% increase in satisfaction at working with Sharp Healthcare. And then there was a minimal shifts in emotional regulation. But again, I think it's because there's need for more training than the 14 days, and then a minimal shift in perceived stress as well. And some of the experience that was reported back, there's a lot of positive feedback. This technique, see, hear, feel, brings me to the present moment. Whatever's going on, if I'm stressed about something, I can pause and go back to see, hear, feel, get back to the present and just move on. This other person felt that they had a newfound agency over their sense of well-being for both physical and emotional. The clarity of the instruction in the app was clear. And then this last person said, I used Headspace, dropped off after a couple lessons. I feel like I'm just scratching the surface of what's possible in Equa. So what we did, again, is we gave these busy healthcare professionals a app on their phones, and they did 10 minutes a day for 14 days. And it really did deliver what I was challenged with, 15 years earlier. Could we find a way to bring training to all the people who could not come to classes and our workshops as well? So let me stop there and see what your questions or comments are about this whole idea of digital therapeutics and training. What do you think?
Hey, Bob, this is Wade.
Sure.
Really exciting. I mean, to see any shift in 5 minutes a day, for 14 days is a huge celebration. I'm curious if they have been able to do any research on like the lasting effects, after those 14 days, 3 months later, are they still feeling like their sleep quality is, at the same place? As I think other research has shared that there might be improvement, but the lasting impacts of the improvement have dissipated.
Yeah, great question, Wade. So at Sharp, they are, I retired, but they are still running research studies. And at some point, because we've only been doing a couple of years, at some point that really is going to be the focus. And the question, as you raise it, does come up, can we encourage people to keep using this 10-minute app on their phone? So what Equa and Carnegie Mellon are doing is developing the app out to extend the training, not make it longer necessarily, but extend it to allow people to keep using it. And I know for a fact, because I still get emails and texts from some of the physicians and nurses who are still using the app. We give it to them and they keep it, and then they can keep doing it as well. So to answer your question, I think Carnegie Mellon's very focused on those long-term studies because that's going to be the critical thing. Yeah. How about others? Thoughts about or questions or objections about? Yeah. Noah?
Hey, Bob.
Yeah,
Great
hi,
to see
Bob.
you.
Yeah.
Nice to see you, everyone. Yeah, really interesting results there. I'm wondering what level of accessibility to live facilitators, or you mentioned they had like text support from mindfulness facilitators. Were there any like live, like one-on-one like coaching support in there?
Yeah, great question, Noah. Because we Equa and Dr. Cresswell strongly believe that the context in which we practice is really important, and we know that to be true. Most of us do experience when we're meditating in a group. It's a different situation. It's a different experience. Most people report that than when we're sitting at home by ourselves. So what we did, to answer your question, is that each group, and the groups were different, we surrounded them with opportunities For example, the physicians, believe it or not, they chose to have a daily morning text from me. And so at 6:30 every morning, I sent everybody a text. Usually it was some support around the technique of the day, or it allowed them to text back questions, and that we had a huge compliance rate on that. And then we set up periodic, almost every day, drop-ins on Zoom. So they could just pop in at different times and consult with my colleague, Jean Frazier, and I, and she's a trained mindfulness coach. And then we had several meetings, which were not well attended because they were too busy. You know, we had a couple half-hour meetings during the day and some at night, but they weren't well attended. And then the interesting thing that happened is that in some of the groups, particularly in human resources and in one of our emergency room in our ED department at Coronado Hospital, some of the employees formed their own practice group, and we encouraged that. So they would take their 10-minute break time and sit down together and use the app. And it was wonderful. It spoke to how we didn't have to have a teacher there. We had the app there to train them. And some of them have continued that practice as well. So does that answer your question, Noah?
Yeah, that speaks to it. So do you think that the personal accountability, that text support, or perhaps some of those Zoom sessions, do you think that was an important factor in the success of the program? And I wonder, because there's always this question of scalability, right? Like the app presents this endlessly scalable tool if it does not involve like live support, and obviously like expense grows and personal time investment that you need as a facilitator. But I do think that level of accountability and support, even if it's just a text, could be an important piece of the magic.
Yeah, no, you're right. You're right. Because, you know, again, we have limited resources. So you can only have so many live sessions for people. But I think given that we gave people a choice, you know, they didn't have to do any of those things as long as they were using the app. That those who felt the need used it. And I think it did make a difference in the results. Because again, with individual coaching, there were 15-minute sessions on Zoom. People could pop in, and then we would uniquely work with their struggles, their challenges with mindfulness. And I think it did make a difference. And that's why I think, as you know, I don't want to overhype AI, but you know, if AI holds its promise and we can develop mindfulness AI coaches that are smarter than me, okay, and better than what I do, then, you know, talk about scalability and cost savings. And, you know, that's where we're going. That's where they're going as well. So other comments or questions or objections about?
Hi, Bob, it's Manijay.
Oh, yeah, hi, Manijay.
Yeah. Hey, how are you? You and I were in 2013.
Yes. Yeah, we were in 13. Yes.
Yeah. I was so excited to see your name, and I thought I need to get on this call. Yeah.
Good buddies back then. Absolutely.
We were, yeah, it was wonderful. So thank you for this presentation. You probably covered it, I'm not sure, but so did you began by saying that 99% of the people that do not come, right, for various reasons. Did you all see the percentage raise in the attendance through this program, this approach? Or what percentage of the company did actually go through the whole thing? as opposed to, you know, how people just tap into Calm or these other apps and they just go in and out because I couldn't sleep, I just listened to this, I was anxious, I just listened to that, and they don't really, I mean, I have clients who do that and I say that's fine, but also learn so that you could do it without
Mhm.
depending on these apps. So what was the percentage of increase in attendance and staying the whole program?
Yeah, great question. Well, you know, given what Noah was saying about we had limited resources. So what we did, and they're still doing, is we had to have, because we were researching, these are studies, it was limited. So, you know, at some point, the hope and the goal is that Sharp will be able to offer the Equa app and training to all 20,000 employees. But we can't do it now, partly because we're doing research. So to answer your question, you know, I had been teaching drop-in classes and classes at Sharp ever since, you know, we graduated, basically. And, you know, I would get, like most of us get, I'd get 5 people. I mean, at most, I'd get 10 people at the most. And often it was the same group of people. So that when we started these research projects with Equa, we got a whole different group of people. For example, the first human resource study we did, we had 30 human resource people. And so I'm not sure what the total is now, but it's several hundred people have gone through these studies. And those, for the most part, are, you know, several hundred people would never have been able to get mindfulness at Sharp. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it was a study. So yeah. Yeah. So when you look at the effectiveness of these apps, and you know, every day, I'm sure everybody else here too, we get emails and offers from app developers, right? They would so to roll an app out into the general public, you know, that's a whole other ball game and needs whole other investment behind it.
Yeah.
Um,
And it's expensive, as you well know.
yeah.
So one of the distinctions that they make and we made is that, again, most of the mindfulness apps are what are described as library apps. In other words, you know, and my partner has Kaiser Insurance and he has Calm. Kaiser's given all Kaiser patients Calm. And so we've looked at it and it's great, but it's kind of a drop-in library, meaning that you kind of pick what you're interested in, and that's good, and you do it. It could be any number of things, but it isn't what we would call systematic skill training. It's not what you're going to get when you get a 6-week MAPS class, for example. So the challenge is, and what Equa set out to do was to create a real training app. So when you do the 14 days for 10 minutes a day, you're going through a systematic set of skills that are measurable and clear and will result in increased mindfulness. And so it's not just picking out, you know, I feel stressed today, so I think I'll do some Calm. That's good. That's good. But it's not going to leave you with the skills at the end that you need. And that's going to be the challenge. That's the challenge with these apps. And then the other thing is, as I was mentioning, that Equa is an interactive system. You know, it's really interesting when you do it yourself because you do maybe a little bit of a technique, and then the trainer, the voice of the trainer comes in and says, tap 1 if this happened, tap 2 if that happened, takes you into a whole different direction. Whole different direction. And it's still kind of limited, but at some point it's going to be the full AI. It's going to be like the teacher saying to you individually, tell me about your experience. And then based on that, the app is going to then help you develop what you need Now it's doing it in a simple way now, but as AI takes off, it will be more complex and more thorough. And again, we'll be able to give people training, not just drop-in meditations. That's the difference.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I'd love to connect with you outside of this, maybe on LinkedIn or otherwise. We'll do that.
Well, I'll leave my email here, and sure, please, anybody, you're welcome to email me. Maybe we have time for one more, and then I want to lead us in a simple technique that we use in the Equa app, which some of you might know. Any last comment or question?
Bob, can I ask a question?
Yes. Hi, Mani.
So good to see you, by the way.
I
It's been
have
a
not
while.
seen you in what, 10 years, 13?
Yeah, at least. Yeah, 2013. So my question is this related to what you were just talking about? I actually spent the last few years working as the head of content for Breathe, which is a meditation app.
Yes.
And what we found is we put in a lot of programs that were kind of like 5-day, 10-day programs to try to deepen skills. And we had a ton of drop off where the first day is used a lot and then it would just drop off quickly. And of course, it could just be, I mean, I believe in the quality of what we were doing. I think it's just, it takes an especially motivated person, I think, to like go through this program. So I was kind of curious from what you'd seen, who were the people who actually stuck through like the full thing, and what was their primary motivation? Was it about anxiety? Was it about improving their focus? Like what makes somebody more likely to stick as opposed to just, I'm feeling really anxious, I just want immediate relief, and that's all I'm looking for?
Great question, Mani. And again, it relates to what Noah was bringing up, is that
Noah and I actually went to middle school and high school together, which I didn't realize. No, yeah, you were in this the TMF, so that's kind of fun.
Really? Oh, you
yeah,
didn't?
I was like
Just
25 years ago.
putting that together, it was kind of blowing my mind.
Well, you guys should stay on after and reconnect. That's fantastic. It is a small world. Yeah. Well, like Noah was pointing out, and I was commenting, is the context in which people get support or use the app is really important. So what we found is that for people who took advantage of some of the outside support, a text, a chat, there was more likelihood that they continued with the training. And then we also offered incentives too, that Equa offered a financial incentive. And David Cresswell believes strongly that that is a motivator. So anybody who completed that first human resource training, I think we gave them $75, and that made a difference. And then, then they're on their own. So, again, how we think of the context in which we place the app is essential. And that is going to be one of the challenges as these things move into the general public. How can you create meaningful communities around the use of them? And then to answer your second question, excuse me, Natalie, one more thing. What we led with is we tried to join with their pain. So, when you talk to a bunch of physicians, the big thing is burnout, stress, overwork. That's what we aimed it at. And we tried to communicate how mindfulness training would make a difference without ignoring that the system is the big problem, okay? But when we were successful in helping them early on see that their stress levels were going down as they did the training, and we made a big deal about that, we got more compliance. It just makes sense. It's if physicians would come back and say, or nurses, I've always had problems sleeping. I'm sleeping better. I don't know what it is. It's since I've been doing this app thing, makes a difference.
Great, thank you.
Well, what I like to do now is, because this is a practice community, okay, I want to lead you in a guided meditation and then leave a few minutes at the end for more comments or questions. For those of you who have any training in what's called unified mindfulness, and I know Sharon does, she's been in, and some of you may as well, there is there's a kind of a foundational practice, and it's the heart by which we the Equa structured the app and the training. And that's first of all to recognize, and you know, students would spontaneously point this out. You know, they would point out that when you're going about the world, what are you doing with your senses? You're seeing, you're hearing, or you're feeling. And you're also having thoughts and emotions. So there's nothing we can experience that we're not seeing, hearing, or feeling. And that would include thoughts, emotions, and body sensations. So the idea of this particular technique and the ability, really the foundation of this practice, is using sensory experience to be the way we develop mindfulness. So I'm going to lead us now in a what's called see, hear, feel, in and out. And just to give you a taste of how the app trains, and it's broken up into pieces. I'm going to do it all at once, okay? So you will be strengthening your mindfulness as you bring your focus and attention to each of the sense experiences. And we're going to do what we call out and in, see, hear, feel. So to start, bring your attention to something in the room with your eyes open that you find interesting, and just rest your attention there. And you can use the label silently to yourself, see, see. Repeat the label at a steady pace. And as you focus, you're strengthening your concentration and your awareness that you're seeing. You know you're seeing. When you get distracted by a sound, a feeling in the body, or something else, just come back to see. And now I'd invite you, if you're comfortable, close your eyes. And we're going to do what's called see in, because when we think in visual and auditory faculties. So picture your favorite food and notice that you can see it. It might be fuzzy. So what you're doing is you're thinking, but use the label see as you notice the picture of your favorite food. Okay, and we can let that go. And now let's do hear. And with eyes open or closed, bring your attention to the sounds around you. Sound of my raspy voice or other sounds, and then use the label to say to yourself the label hear in a steady pace. And as you focus, you're strengthening your mindfulness, your concentration. So let's hear out the sounds in the world. Let's do hear in. So maybe with eyes closed, if you're comfortable, silently repeat your phone number so that you can hear it. And notice you can actually hear it. You're talking to yourself, and you can use the label hear for this experience as well. Maybe repeat it again, and then label it hear. And then lastly we'll do feel, and feel out are all the body sensations that we can have. So you might notice your feet on the floor, or any body sensation that you're aware of, and just use the label feel. 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 And we'll call that feel out. And feel in is emotions. And every emotions show up in the body. We may not be aware of it. And one way you can practice with it right now is put a slight smile on your face and notice if it doesn't kind of light up something inside of you, even a little bit. And notice that feeling. And we'd use the label feel for that as well. Okay, so let's bring our attention back into the room. What we've just done, we call that a tour of the senses, and it's taught in bits and pieces systematically. But what it empowers people to do in a 10-minute training, 14 days, is to begin to be able to have a mindfulness technique, a tool by which they can be aware of sights and sounds in the world, auditory thinking, visual thinking, and emotions. So it gives them, those practices give people tools to be aware of anything they're going to experience. You know, it's far more than just people sitting with their eyes closed, focused on their breath, which does develop concentration. But when you learn to practice with your eyes open, and you learn to be aware of all your sense experience, and you have a tool to name it and work with it, you can then move into what I call portable practices when you're on the exercise bike at the gym, when you're driving your car, in the case of the workplace, when a nurse is giving a medication. You know, it makes mindfulness radically accessible and radically able to be implemented in real life. So I want to give you, some of you may know the unified mindfulness techniques and are familiar with it, but if you're not, the hope of this digital therapeutics is to really open up the skill set for people to experience mindfulness in daily life, not just in the classroom. Okay, so in the few minutes we have left, comments, questions. Those of you who know me, I love objections even more. So what do you think? And I think, Natalie, you were going to ask something. I interrupted you, I think.
Yeah, no, I didn't really have a question, more like a statement, which was kind of brief. I'm an educational researcher in mindfulness. And actually, I'm going to a conference at WashU, and David Creswell will be there, and some of the unified mindfulness folks too. So I'm excited about that. And I'm sure they'll be talking about this work. Yeah. So that's exciting. Yep. Yeah. So I wanted to say that, so my work is in education, but focus on mental health and mindfulness research. And just thinking so much about the organizational context and what a great starting point this training could be within, let's say, a healthcare setting to introduce mindfulness, and then the organizational context being so essential with just the way you were describing at the beginning, with practices being embedded into daily work practice. And then also just my hunch and 2 cents in terms of having worked in various systems, also as a clinical social worker, and understanding physician burnout, is just like the role of the system, and feeling like, not like the system cares for you, but that you're in an organizational setting where, like, you know, you're sending text messages in the morning to support people who want to be supported, and just sort of the wrap around of the essential importance of this technology support in the instructional learning, but then the ways that the organization and the people can help support and embed these practices. And anyway, that's what I found in my own research, is like when it's really threaded through multiple layers and that's what makes it sustainable too.
Yeah, Absolutely. Well, you know, we had comments from employees that said things like, this is the best benefit that Sharp ever offered me. You know, and we have a pretty rich wellness program, but this particular benefit, people really did get something for. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. How about others? Any other? Hi, Sharon. Hi.
Yeah, well, I just wanted to say that the see, hear, feel technique I used with a 12-week long haul COVID group whose energy was really compromised. And the portability, the simplicity, the ease, and just using it for even 5 seconds at a time, 3 or 4 times through the day, letting them know that you don't have to sit on a cushion. You don't have to go to the Himalayas, you know, people who are really compromised. It was very powerful, and I was amazed at the rapid uptake. So it was just really exciting to hear about the app, because when I was going through the training, we heard about it a lot, but I haven't ever actually knew anything about it until what you presented tonight. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome, Sharon. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. Eric. Eric, maybe before, I'm aware we're at 7:30. I'm glad to stay, but some of you may need to go, and I want to thank you for being here. It's good to be with you all.
Thank you, Bob.
You, okay? Yeah, you're welcome. Eric.
Can you hear me, Bob?
Yes. Uh-huh.
I just had so I am visually impaired, and I do have a question of how you might alter that practice for someone that is visually or hearing impaired.
Yes. Well, Eric, the additional practice is what's called a rest practice. And you know, it highlights that in our experience, either our experience is active or restful. And the way I illustrate it when I teach it is, if you squeeze your fist, you can feel active muscles, right? And if you just turn your hand over, it's very relaxing. It's restful. So the reason I bring that up is that you can actually tap into see rest when either you close your eyes, or if you're visually impaired, there may be light and speckled sight, but it can be really restful if you relate to it in that way. Same way with hearing. When we teach here, let's say hear out or hear in, we also usually teach what we call rest along with that. And that could be a silent room is restful. You know, why do people in a busy city go into a quiet church? So they have silence, and that's restful. And so too with those moments where you don't hear anything, that can be restful as well. Does this make sense, Eric?
Yes.
No. And, you know, I think it speaks to, in this model, how any sensory experience, you could label see, hear, or feel, active or restful. So it opens up to, like what Sharon was saying, it opens up to the people in our groups all kinds of possibilities to work with in terms of what is going to be the object of focus for your mindfulness. Not just the breath, but any sense experience as well.
And then knowing your audience to explain that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Exactly. Well, you know, a simple example is I have tinnitus in my right ear. And I know I had, you know, which many of you may know, it's just a constant.
Left the meeting.
What's that?
Oh, it's just my software talking to me. Sorry about that.
Yeah, okay. So tinnitus is, you know, and I did have people come into my groups over the years who said, I've tried everything. I've gone to psychologists. There's nothing. I can do, it's driving me crazy. It can be really impairing for some people. I can hear it right now. When you relate to it as just here, it's a physical sound. We know the brain makes it. When you can relate to it, and that's how I learned to practice with it here, it became an old friend. And now, not only is it not bother me, but anytime I want to ground myself in a sound, I listen to the ringing in my ear in a mindful way. So I think that's just another example of how you could take any physical sensation that a person's experiencing and turn it into a practice, a mindfulness practice as well.
Thank you, Bob.
You're most welcome. Maybe one last comment or question.
Hi, Bob.
Yeah. Hi.
It's Nancy. I
Oh,
just,
hello. Yeah.
anything that you can bring into the hospital setting to help with educating nurses, doctors, and all the professionals that are there is so important. I was working on this research study that I told you about. I consulted with you for, it was a while ago, but it's still ongoing. But ultimately, it had to be narrowed down to using child life and not using nurses and doctors in the study because they just found they didn't have the time.
Yep.
So it has to be really short, but really directive,
Yep.
I think, to really help them to realize that they can do this in small and big ways. You know, in the hospital setting is huge. So I applaud you in this effort. It's really important. So thank you for all of
You're most welcome. Thanks for saying that, Nancy. Yeah, and you know what you're saying is so true that we to be successful, we had to target what was important to them. You know, as I said, everybody, all the doctors said, we're stressed out. We have no time for anything. We can't pay attention anymore. Our attention spans are decreasing. And in our work-life balance, you know, so we had to target those areas and very quickly, based on, that's part of the training does, is you want to target those areas as best you can so that people begin to get some relief immediately as best they can.
Yeah.
So, you know, I had wonderful, you have lots of stories, but real quick one. This idea, I had a nurse who came to one class, and months later, after Thanksgiving, she came back to my drop-in. She said, I just want to share, I came to the one class and I learned this thing you called herein. I realized I was talking to myself all day long, but I never paid attention to it. Now, whenever it's happening, I can label it here, and I know I'm doing it. And she said, here's an example. I was at Thanksgiving dinner. Every year, my brother-in-law says something political or religious that causes a big fight, and I argue, and it ruins every dinner. And she said, this year, I couldn't believe it. He starts in, and all of a sudden, I heard myself saying to myself, what a jerk. And I labeled it here. And then he went on, and I saw him, and I realized how I feel. I don't like him. I labeled it feel. And then I labeled it, I wish he weren't here. Well, she did that, and she didn't get hooked. And when she was in the kitchen doing dishes after dinner, her husband came in and said, are you okay, honey? Because she had radically changed her behavior. And what I took away from that is, again, this is a nurse who popped into one class and for whatever reason got that little way of labeling her thinking as here and used it to change her life. And that's the spirit that you're talking about. We need to kind of give people accessible moments, well, not just moments, accessible tools for mindfulness that change their life. And then, you know, the hope is that they then carve out time to come to your class, to do the workshop, to go on retreat, I'm not saying we should not be offering that, but we need to open it up as well.
Yes. Thank you.
So I'm going to stop the record. Well, I think it's paused anyway. Yeah, it stopped. So.